Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jeremiah DeGulla, and I'm a solutions advisor for the Center for Professional and Executive Development. And I'm excited to have you with us as we hear from the Wisconsin School of Business Dean Vallabh Sambamurthy about how the C-suite should act as a catalyst for digital transformation. Before I introduce Dean Samba, I'd like to share a few words from our sponsors, the Wisconsin School of Business Center for Professional and Executive Development, otherwise known as CPED for short. CPED offers online and in-person programs and certificates that will give you the modern, relevant skills needed to advance your career. All of our programs offer interactive learning sessions facilitated by instructors with practical business experience. CPED also partners with organizations to provide customized professional development programs, coaching, and consulting. For more information on the Center for Professional and Executive Development, please visit our website at uwcped.org. And if you have any questions during today's webinar, you can submit those questions using the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. And you can expand or collapse the control panel using the orange arrow. We'll post questions that are submitted during a Q&A at the end of today's webinar. I also want to mention that today's webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording and a copy of the presentation will be made available within the next few days. And now I get the pleasure of introducing Dean Samba. Welcome, Dean. We're very excited to have you with us today.
Thank you, Jeremiah. It's a great pleasure to be here, and good afternoon to everyone out there. I'm going to share with you some ideas and insights on the basis of research done both by me and an extended community of fellow researchers to talk about what is the promise and the opportunity as well as the challenge of competing in a new reality, which we call the digital reality. So let's start by ensuring that we all know what we are talking about. It is true today that technology is everywhere, and there are a wide range of technologies, and they include analytics and AI. They include the social web. They include the mobile apps and cloud computing, the Internet of Things. You can see that the beat goes on because we continue now beginning to hear about the emergence of robotics, drones, and 3D printing, particularly in the context of supply chains. We're beginning to hear about the metaverse, augmented reality, virtual reality in ways that might shape our interactions and experience. So the point is that technology continually innovates and presents new opportunities in ways that both challenge our mindset as well as make us think about what's the basis of competition. How should we think about innovation? How should we think about leading our organizations to be relevant, to be competitive in this new world reality? So this webinar is about distilling key ideas into what we call the C-suite agenda, comprising of CEOs, CFOs, Chief Operating Officer, heads of marketing, supply chain, HR, and all the other functions. The key premise in this is that you are the enablers of significant change and transformation in your organization. By your mindset, by your words, by your behaviors, you can either encourage or discourage those who work with you, those who work for you, from engaging in innovation. But that's not easy. So let's talk about how should you think about a holistic approach to nurturing digital transformation. I'm going to talk about 6 different ways which you should be paying attention to. And I'll go through each one of them with examples. Today, on the C-suite, there must be attention to the following. Do you facilitate, do you nurture, do you reimagine your business with the art of the possibilities? Do you reimagine your ecosystem? Who do you partner with? Who do you have relationships with? As all these technologies emerge, how do you discover those sweet spots of opportunity? Technology is revolutionizing business models. So how do you architect those new digital business models? It's always been about the customer, but today technology allows you to creatively envision new ways of reconnecting with your customers. So what are those ways in which you should be thinking about them? And then most significantly, how do you champion digital transformation in your own organization? So let's get to it in each aspect turn by turn. The first way in which executives or leadership should be thinking about the new digital reality is, are you open to reimagining your business around customers and not limiting yourselves to what products or services do you currently serve? Let's look at it in the context of an example. We all know about John Deere. John Deere is an incumbent. It is a global leader for farm equipment. Yet, as John Deere looked at their business and they realized that competition was no longer national, but it was global, they were going to be at a disadvantage if they purely competed on farm equipment, because global competition means there is somebody out there who can do a better job in terms of cheaper farm equipment. So John Deere asked themselves, what business should we be in? And the realization was, our customer is the farmer, and the farmer needs more than just equipment. That's only one piece of how we help farmers. If we walk in the shoes of our farmers, if we map their customer journey, the realization should be that farmers depend upon weather data in order to extract the best value from their land, that their ability to plant and harvest is dependent very much upon the vagaries of Mother Nature in terms of variations in rain, humidity, and temperature. They would appreciate having intelligence about the weather forecasts, but that's not enough. Marry that with seed optimization. What seeds should I plant? What is their performance? How can I optimize the yield? And how do I marry seed data with my soil, with the weather? To that, bring in irrigation. What can I do in effective and optimal irrigation of my land? Where should I place the irrigators? Where should I place the field sensors? What kind of data can I gather, and how can analytics help me do a better job of predicting and anticipating weather, seed conditions, soil conditions, and water irrigation? So this realization has led John Deere to anticipate a huge wealth of opportunities where, because of their leadership in selling tractors, tillers, and planters, they are the ones who really understand their farmers. They're the ones who really understand the farmer's land. And this presented a whole new opportunity for reimagining their business and owning the entire farmer's mindset. They still sell equipment, but that's not all they do. So this is an example of a legacy incumbent positioning itself to be a major player in the new digital reality. So what is the story here? The story here is, do not be constrained by your existing notions about industry. Do not be constrained by what you currently offer. Think about your customer. Now, let me introduce three different concepts to you in the context of the customer. First, what is the customer value proposition? Value proposition is what pain points are you addressing for the customer? How are you doing it in a superior manner? Because that's the basis of the relationship. That's the reason why the customer rewards you consistently in the face of competition. Now let's break that down into other concepts, and those two concepts are delivered needs and latent needs. Let me illustrate that with an example and work that was influenced by the highly pioneering work of the late Professor Clay Christensen, who devoted a lifetime of work on why do successful companies die? Why do successful companies fail to innovate? What's the innovator's dilemma? So let's take a look at this figure to understand why disruption is inevitable. In most industries, most incumbents know what their customers want. They know that those needs are fairly stable. They know that they don't need to make too many changes because they have spent a lifetime of a relationship with their customers in discovering their delivered needs. Think about banks, think about John Deere. John Deere knew exactly what farm equipment to build and sell, and they optimized their manufacturing, supply chain, sales force to sell to the farmers. So this graph, this line represents the fact that incumbents make continuous improvements. They don't stay steady, but they don't make any fundamental changes to the product, to the customer selling strategy, to manufacturing, supply chain, and they are well optimized. Banks are the same. Even universities are the same in terms of students will come to campus, and that's where they will learn. But Professor Christensen's point was that in every industry, there are customers whose needs are unmet. We call them the latent needs. Why are they unmet? They are unmet because maybe the incumbents are unaware of those needs, or they are unmet because the incumbents know about them, but it is uneconomical for them to serve these customers. In banks, banks are built around the idea that you have credit rating, that you have a driver's license, that you can actually maintain a bank account because of earnings. But what about those who still conduct transactions but do not meet the criteria for a bank account? They are invisible to the banking sector. Their needs are unmet. The legendary story is about Blockbuster and Netflix. And I kind of chuckle, ironically, to talk today about Netflix, given the disastrous earnings they had yesterday. But let's stay with the story to understand the concept. Blockbuster was an industry incumbent at the end of the century. They were the dominant one. They had 2,000 stores, but the model was you went to a Blockbuster store, you rented a video, but they would only have 10 copies of a specific movie. And if you were not there in time, it's too bad, you had to rent something else. And then there was the much hated late fees or fine, because they needed to turn their inventory around rapidly. If they did not get the videos back in time, they could not rent it out to the next customer. So hence, they had the concept of late fees. If you did not return the video rewound, and I'm talking about a concept that many of the youngsters will be wondering, what is he talking about as a video cassette? It existed. So you had to rewind it. Now this model worked well because Blockbuster was dominant, but there were unmet or latent needs. People not finding the movie that they wanted, or people being shamed because they had to pay the late fees. So along comes Netflix and says, you do not have to pay late fees because we will send you the movie. By that time we had the DVDs. We'll send you the DVD in the mail. And guess what? You can make a list of all the movies you want to watch, and we'll send you your top 3 movies in the mail, which means that you always got your top choices. Secondly, if you are a binge watcher, you could watch movies nonstop and send them back, and we'll send you the next set. In other words, for $15, you can watch as many as 30 movies. What a deal. Or if you wanted to watch that movie casually or gradually, you kept it, and they took the whole they built in the convenience because you never had to go to find that movie in a store. You just typed it up online and they sent it to you home in 24 to 48 hours. So that was Netflix coming in and discovering that there is a group of customers whose needs are unmet and building a business around it. Now, the interesting part is initially this was small, but as word of mouth grew, more and more customers flocked to this Netflix model. And this point represents where it was too late. Why did Blockbuster fail to respond? Initially because the size of those who were here was too small for them. Secondly, they realized that it was too expensive for them to pivot. If they start sending DVDs in the mail, what do they do with those 2,000 stores and the sunk cost? So what does this story tell us? It tells us that in every industry, incumbents become comfortable. They fail to realize that while they're doing a good job on the delivered needs and their competitors are also performing for the same business model, there are others, very often outsiders, who are finding it possible to tap into the latent needs and building new businesses. Is this just a one-off story, or is this a reality today? We know that in industry after industry today, consumers' expectations for convenience, security, trust, flexibility, and personalization are challenging the incumbents. They're creating sweet spots of opportunity for those who are willing to discover those latent needs. Think about fintech. Think about ride sharing. Think about even my own education industry, where we're seeing the rise of badges and other forms of learning. Another important trend for everybody to keep in mind is the rise of digital natives. Those who were born in the late 90s, they have grown up with a smartphone, with Google, with Netflix, with Amazon, and they don't realize that the world was not this way all the time. Their mindset of consumption is very different. The digital natives believe less in asset acquisition, owning a home, owning a car. They believe more in consumption and sharing of consumption. Hence, Uber is challenging the whole concept of car ownership. Airbnb is challenging the whole concept of the lodging industry. So there is an inevitable trend toward latent needs, and the challenge is to discover that. So what do? In terms of reimagining your business, your biggest asset will be data, knowledge, and insights about your customers. And you need to ask the questions about what business can we be in, not just what business are we in. And what businesses do you want to be in, and how will you get there? In addition to that, how will you get there fast? How will you get there with scale? And scope means that you think about John Deere. John Deere now is no longer just making farm equipment. They have to hire R&D scientists. They have to hire geologists who can predict soil. They have to hire biologists who can talk about seed optimization. They have to hire meteorologists who can help them build proactive, smart weather mapping. So those are ways in which you are looking at business scale expanding, scope expanding. Think about Amazon. Which business is Amazon in today? I think the answer is Amazon is in so many businesses. And the only constant to their approach is they know how to harvest data, they know how to mine data, they know how to discover needs, latent needs, and they know how to build customer relationships through technology. That has to be the mindset in reimagining your business. Moving on, the next important insight for the C-suite is, now that we want to reimagine our business, how should we compete? So let me talk about a new way of thinking about strategy and ecosystems. A highly influential book is written by Professor Venkataraman, whose book is titled The Digital Matrix. And I encourage you to look at it if you like these ideas. What is his argument? He argues that today, the concept of an industry boundary is no longer relevant because an industry boundary protects incumbents. It makes you look at others like you who are all operating on delivered needs. There are two new sets of players who are impacting every incumbent. They are the digital giants. They are a handful of companies that include Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, or what used to be Google, Uber as an example today, and eBay, Microsoft, increasingly Tesla. What's common to these digital giants is they were born in the digital era. Their mindset is about technology, innovation, disruption, and focus upon the customer's latent needs. Their mindset is one of disruption. They look at how things should be rather than why things are the way they are. And then there are the tech entrepreneurs, the small startups who focus on specific customer problems in specific industries and create new ways of thinking. So one important implication for every incumbent today is, are we building relationships with these new partners, the tech entrepreneurs and digital giants? Because we know today that these digital giants will not replace the incumbents. They are bringing a new mindset. The entrepreneurs are bringing a new mindset, but the incumbents know the customer. They have the understanding of what it takes to be in banking or education or automotive manufacturing, name it, or retail. So what is more likely to happen is the emergence of new ecosystems, new business partnerships. And the question for you is, are you experimenting with new relationships? Are you building these new partners? Professor Venkataraman also argues that every industry will go through 3 phases of transformation. Change will not happen overnight, so you have an opportunity to read the roadmap and be ready. He presents evidence that in every industry, change starts through experiments, very often done by digital giants or by tech entrepreneurs who are focusing on latent needs. Here is an example of Amazon in 1995. Why do we need a store? Why can't we sell books through the internet? The internet was rapidly becoming an important infrastructure. Notice that in the late 90s, Borders, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, Sears were the major booksellers. They had a highly optimized supply chain and store infrastructure to sell books, and they sold a lot of books. They were paying attention to Amazon, but they really looked at that as an experiment and did not necessarily see why they should disrupt their proven business model. So experiments happen. very often through a digital giant or the actions of a tech entrepreneur. Uber, experimenting with the fact that people might be interested in sharing their vehicles, experimenting with the idea that a pain point for most people is finding that taxi stand or flagging down a rude taxi driver. How cool would it be if the car ride came to me where I was and found out where I was, because the mobility and the analytics and the cloud would make me visible to the driver. So those were experiments at the edge. But very soon, in the research done by Professor Venkatraman, the experiments acquire momentum to a point where the incumbents start realizing that there's a need for new partnerships. For 18 years, I was a professor at Michigan State University and near Detroit. And we began to see the arrival of non-traditional auto players into Detroit in order to build these partnerships. So you began to see the arrival of Apple, Alphabet, Uber, Didi, Tesla, Mobileye. These are all technology companies seeking ways in which you can enhance the driver experience. Suddenly, Apple CarPlay or Google Android Auto, ways in which you can get into your car, connect your smartphone, play your songs, or do the things you want to do with your smartphone, but do it more safely on the dashboard, became a redefinition of what goes into a car. Finally, in his research, he also presents compelling evidence that this leads to a reinvented industry. Think about retailing today. Retailing today is reinvented. It's digital retailing. It's not that many of the retailers have died and been replaced, but we've just seen new ways in which customers can find what they want and extend their idea of value. If you walk into Macy or if you walk into Nordstrom, at the front you will see some merchandise displayed with their Pinterest scores, meaning that Pinterest has now come from the virtual world into the reality of a store. So that's what we mean by the reinvented industry. The auto industry is in the grip of reinvention. If you looked at your new car, you see there's so much technology in the dashboard. You might be having an electric vehicle. With the recent commitment that GM and Ford have made, that's a reinvented auto sector. So for all of you out there, I encourage you to think about your own industry and ask yourself, where are we? Are we at the phase where there are experiments? Are we at the collision, or are we at the reinvention? And it would be great to have the conversation of, are you paying attention to the right partners? Are you reinventing your ecosystem? A third element of thinking about this new model of competition is, where are the opportunities, what you call the digital sweet spots? My friend, Professor George Westerman at MIT, has a great book, which I encourage you to check out. It's called Leading Digital. And the point they make, which is very valid, is that here are some ways in which you can find those digital sweet spots. Can you use technology to enrich the customer experience? Can you enhance the power of your core operations? Can you create innovative product and service platforms? Starbucks is legendary for how they have leveraged their apps and their store to create multiple forms in which you can consume. You can order on your app and pick up, and you can gain points, and you can sometimes pay for your next coffee with those points. You can customize your purchases. If you're driving on the highway, your app can tell you where is the next Starbucks, and you can place an order to drive by and pick up. So many different ways of enriching the customer experience, and that's what fintechs are about today in the financial services industry. We've always talked about how do we streamline our core operation. So banking, a lot of core activities, how do we streamline them? How do we create new product and services? Recently, I saw Uber announcing a new service. Let's say you cooked up a mean jambalaya, one of my favorite dishes, and you want to send it to your friend across town. You can now book a Uber service where they show up at your doorstep, take what you want to share with your friend and deliver it there, which is a new product or service, which is a new way of solving the last mile problem. So the message out there is, how can technology help in all these new ways of discovering opportunities for customer experience, core operation, or product and service innovation? The next area of opportunity is even more bold, and it is even more transformational, which is discovering new business models. In particular, there are two business models which are becoming very prevalent in industry after industry. The first one is the omni-channel. Think about Carvana in the auto industry, which is a one-stop shop for buying cars. And they offer you a great customer relationship. You can pick your car and they'll deliver the car at your doorstep with the keys, and they've already taken care of the payment and insurance. So omni-channel is the fact that customer convenience takes many forms. Your customers want you to converse with you, to talk to you and work with you across many channels and have a seamless experience. They want to discover their needs through the social media, but they want to be able to place the order and have it collected. And they want you to recognize that you're the same person across multiple channels. This is the model of retailing today. This is the model of banking. This is the model industry after industry. And then there is another model called the platform model. Think about Apple iTunes. Apple iTunes originally began as a platform for you to load your music and consume that on your iPod or iPad. But very quickly, that became the platform for apps. That has become the platform for payments. And a platform model today is a model that connects consumers and producers. It is an asset-light model. Apple does not develop the apps, app developers do. And Apple helps consumers discover the apps, and Apple collects a part of the payment. Uber is a platform. Airbnb is a platform. So the question is there a platform model in your business? Is there a platform model in your industry? That could be both an opportunity and a threat. So here's an example. Can banks become platforms? So let me share the story of Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs created an internal technology architecture to help their client agents work with clients in creating highly customized risk return products. They realized that that knowledge was so complex, they wanted to support their agents across the world in doing the right thing without incurring risk, but still being customized and customer responsive. So they created a platform called Simon, Structured Investment Marketplace and Online Network. The important part is it was initially available only to the internal sales agents, solution agents. Then they opened it up to their clients through APIs, where knowledgeable clients could self-design their own products. As that gained popularity, they realized that this was an opportunity to offer their clients and those interactions to other companies, and doing so become the dominant platform, expand their product scope. Remember I said reimagine your business around customer, not product? Goldman did that. They went from selling their own customized notes to saying that our customers need a variety of products and services, and we are the platform that caters to them. The next element of the C-suite agenda is reconnect with your customers. This is the traditional marketing funnel. What's observable here is that most of the conversations with the customer were through paid advertising or PR, what we call B2C, company-directed messaging. As human beings, we've always cherished word of mouth. We've cherished telling our friends about our opinions, and our friends have wanted those opinions, yet we could only have talked to 3 people, or maybe our family or our neighbors down the street. So the traditional word of mouth, while important, played a limited role in customer purchase cycle, in how customers discovered what they wanted, chose what they wanted, and expressed their satisfaction and loyalty, which leads to repeat purchase. What's the new reality today? We have a wide range of platforms and technologies for conversations. Today, companies have to realize that their company-directed messaging, what we call B2C, is now augmented with C2C, customer to customer. They are talking to each other through reviews, through blogs, through communities, through Twitter, through Facebook. And they're talking about you. They're talking about your product. They're talking about their experience. And by the way, this word of mouth has more credibility and drive to action than a firm directed message. But they're also directly talking to you, C2B, consumer to business. If they have a bad product experience, they're taking to Twitter, they're taking to social commerce. So what does this mean for the modern way of reconnecting with your customer? Social media listening. Do you have investments made to monitor what's being said about your product? What's being said about a recent experience? How do you respond to the negative news? How do you leverage the positive news? That's going to be very important. In other words, B2C will now have to be augmented with C2B and C2C. How do you engage in those conversations? And then the last element is change is hard. We know that, but the change just got magnified. And we say champion digital transformations. Why is change magnified? Because there are different levels of change and they progressively become harder and demand your attention. The first level of change is data is the core asset. And for most incumbent firms, their history was not helpful to data being the core asset. The data is locked away in different locations and different processes. The digital giants like Amazon and Apple or Alphabet, they can leverage insights. Netflix was legendary for using customer insights to make investments in shows. So you need to get there. But that's only step one. Step two is processes are the pipes through which the data flows, through which insights flow. Legacy processes need to be replaced with processes which are modular, which are scalable and replicable. That was the John Deere challenge. And then the hardest part is changing the mindset. A mindset which is accepting of risk-taking, a mindset that is accepting of experiments, a mindset that is accepting of insights that challenge your conventional wisdom. That's the C-suite agenda. Here's an example of DBS in the banking sector. They realized that they needed to pivot. So what was their mission? Make banking joyful by digital to the core, be customer obsessed, and bring a startup culture in a legacy incumbent organization. Their CEO said, we want to be the D in Gandalf. For you Lord of the Rings folks, you know what that means, but Gandalf here stands for the digital giants are Google, Apple, Netflix, Amazon, LinkedIn, Facebook. And DBS's bold vision was that we should be the D. We should be mentioned in the same breath as these companies. Compare ourselves with these technology companies, not banks. So how did they do it? They were very obsessive about customer journey maps, discovering the pain points, walk in the shoes of our customer to find those digital sweet spots. They launched their first mobile banking app. They built new partnerships. They started hiring new people and building a startup culture. So what does this mean? Tone at the top. It's very important. Are you talking about transformation? Are you talking about risk taking? Are you talking about a commitment to empowering new ideas? What should be the role of the CIO? The traditional role of the CIO was that of managing technology and operations. While that may still be true, today CIOs have a huge opportunity to be the digital strategy catalyst. They have a huge opportunity to be the innovation catalyst because they understand technology, but they must understand how to marry technology with strategy, business, and innovation. What are you measuring? The balanced scorecard is a great way of measuring. Are you measuring experiments? Companies like Amazon and Google and others measure how many customer experiments did we do each week. And I'm going to end by saying experimentation, experimentation, experimentation. So Jeremiah, I hope that this was a provocative and stimulative set of ideas, and I look forward to our audience reactions and questions.
Thank you so much, Dean Samba. And with that, we'll open it up for questions. Again, you can submit your questions using the questions box on the sidebar, and you can expand or collapse that sidebar using the orange arrow if you've already done that. Dean Samba, I'm glad you brought up banking and digital banking. And one of the questions that I had was, why is it harder for incumbent companies to implement digital innovations?
Yeah. It's a great question. Incumbents were at one time innovators. And the biggest challenge in organizations is that if you're continually innovating, then you're not leveraging and building operations. That's what you need to make money. So the traditional challenge for companies is, how do you make sure that you're not changing every day, you're never making money? And at the same time, if you just stay with the one product that's good for you, the same customer, then you're doing well in the short term, but what about your long term? Are you losing sight of what's the future? That tension has just been magnified because in the old days, banks looked at each other and they knew what they were doing, but they did not anticipate a Microsoft or a Quicken or a Apple to come in with a very different mindset. So they have assets that banks don't have. They know how to master technology. Think about talent. Where do the digital natives or those who have technology talent want to go to work? Despite San Francisco being this expensive, they all want to go work there. So for banks or any incumbent, the challenge is, how do you attract the new talent? And then once the new talent is there, how do you empower them? What happens when a smart person comes in and says, you know what? The customer will want to do everything through a smartphone. And the idea of a branch office is irrelevant. What will your first reaction will be? Get out of town. You're a youngster, you don't know anything, right? So how do you bring that mindset to empower innovation? Those are interesting things. And I go back to saying experiments. Idea of experiments usually was, yeah, we got an R&D group that does experiments. But today, everybody does innovation. Everybody does R&D. Everybody does experiments. How do you build an organization that embraces that? Those are some challenges.
So stepping back a little bit, will digital giants replace incumbents in most industries?
Yeah, I chuckle because going back to 2000, the first wave of technology invention was the dot-com boom. And people said all these dot-com companies will replace every incumbent. The retailers will be dead. It did not happen. So these digital giants, they have resources, they have wisdom, but they cannot replace the incumbents. Think about Uber. Uber still needs a GM or a Ford or an auto company because Uber is not going to build cars. So on the other hand, GM now realizes that not everybody who sits in a GM car owns that car. So they have now asked themselves, maybe we are measuring the wrong thing. We are defining our business with number of passenger cars sold, but the number of passenger miles driven is a much bigger number because that owner of a Ford GM car is a Uber ride-sharing driver. So that means there are others who are sitting in the car. So Uber and Apple, they need GM as much as GM needs. So Apple CarPlay, right? Where are they going to put in if there are no cars that GM or Ford build? So in that sense, it's a new relationship, but very much of an important relationship from both sides.
So we have a question from one of our audience members, and the question goes, do you have any ideas on how a professional institution could be a platform business?
Yeah. This is a great question. I'll try to make it a short answer. What is a platform model? A platform model is a shift from make and sell to connect and sell. What does that mean? If you're an automotive company, you make cars, you hold them in inventory, and you sell it. In doing so, the word inventory is important because if a car doesn't sell, you carry the inventory carrying cost. So that's make and sell. That's the traditional merchant model. Walmart is a merchant. They buy inventory from Procter & Gamble, and then they sell. And if the inventory doesn't sell, they bear the economic risk. Amazon platform model is they bring Procter & Gamble, they bring you, and if you're looking for diapers, they connect the two of you. You place an order on Procter & Gamble, and they deliver to you, and Amazon essentially takes a piece of the business, transaction fee. Uber is a platform. So if you are a merchant, how do you become a platform? Think about John Deere. John Deere is a merchant model because they make and sell farm equipment. But as I talked about, when they realize that their customer needs support for seed optimization, weather, and all of that, there are other companies who can do a better job of growing and selling the right kind of seeds, building weather applications, and so on. So suddenly John Deere is now a platform because the different types of services that customers need, John Deere doesn't provide all of them, but they make it possible for seeds developers, for irrigation equipment, or other companies to start offering their services through John Deere platform to the companies. So that's an example of a platform model.
Thank you. Our next question revolves around finding balance. So what successful strategies have you seen that balance short-term versus long-term friction?
Great question. And again, think about two retailers, Walmart and Target. Who emerged as their biggest competitor? Amazon. So what they realized is they were not ready for digital natives, those who like to shop through an app, those who like to shop through the internet. They were not ready for omni-channel. Yet at the same time, people do not associate Walmart with anything other than this bricks and mortar retailer, or Target with the bricks and mortar retailer. They also needed to attract the digital talent. So what did they do? They opened up a new company in a new location in California in order to build their digital business. And eventually they may merge the two, but in the short term, they needed to learn, experiment, and grow. How do you build a digital business? And for them, their current store model was going to be a barrier. They could not change that fast. And even if they changed that fast, they might have disrupted their store model too rapidly and stop making short-term revenue. So this is what we call an ambidextrous model. Ambidextrous means you can perform equally well with your left hand and right hand. So the advice companies now they undertake is that there must be a side of our organization focused on incentivized and rewarded for innovation and longer term vision, and another side for execution, focusing on tomorrow. And then how do you value and respect both sides? How do you keep them separate so that they don't run into each other? And that's the challenge for the C-suite today. That's why I said the digital transformation is hard. It can be done, but it requires a willingness to change and a willingness to bring tension and complexity in-house.
Thank you for that. We've talked about agriculture and banking. I'm curious, which industries have you seen that have been reinvented? And if you could give us a little insight on where's the disruption happening next?
I would say that the clear example of an industry that has been reinvented is retailing. Think about how we buy clothes today. It's not that we buy it one way, we buy it in several ways, and each time we buy it depends upon the moment. I am notorious for buying my clothes through my apps, Joseph A. Bank or name it, right? But there are other times I'm equally looking forward to actually walking into a store and letting a sales agent pamper me or educate me about how my dress style is too old-fashioned. So what's fundamental is that in the retail today, you have multiple choices. You can pick and choose. That's the omni-channel experience, and that's been reinvented. Banking, certain parts of banking have been reinvented. When is the last time we've gone to a bank? We make our payment. When is the last time we actually wrote a check? Right. So it's either direct debits or we do it through the apps. So fintech is rapidly creeping in and changing a lot of the customer interactions. Insurance is beginning to rapidly change in the process of reinvention. The auto industry, the car as we think of today is very different from the car we thought of 5 years ago. 5 years ago, when I bought my car, I went to the dealer and said, how can I sync my iPhone to my car? And he said, nobody wants that. Today, what happens when you buy a car? You turn it on and it says, sync your iPhone or your Google, right? It's inevitable. So the car has changed, the product has changed. Car buying is changing. The last 5 cars I bought were through a online company called Auto by Tal, where I just simply went and picked the car and they delivered. Today, that's become common. Carvana is rapidly changing it. So education, my own industry, is beginning to go through rapid transformations, particularly what we call the adult learner space. So I think each one of us needs to ask the question, what parts of my industry have been reinvented? Where is the next one in our value chain? Where is it going to be next? And what will stay the same? And then who are we partnering with in that change process? That's the message of transformation.
And thank you. We have time for one last question, and it comes from our audience. And I really appreciate this question because of all the work that we're doing to help support our nonprofit and association organizations out there. So the question revolves around how can nonprofit or member organizations stay relevant in this digital transformation time to serve their membership?
Yeah, great question. And not to put a plug in for our Badger Executive Talk, last night I hosted Dory McWhorter, one of our distinguished alums, and she is the CEO and president of YMCA Metropolitan Chicago. So if you don't want to listen to a Badger talk, go read some of the stories about Dory. Dory moved from a for-profit to a non-profit environment, and she said ultimately they're the same. It's a great quote. She has their similar businesses just with a different tax code, meaning that they're about customer relationship, they're about operations, and they're about technology. So very often these principles are relevant even in nonprofit. But a concrete example I'll give you is think about the popularity of crowdfunding. One of the challenges for nonprofits is their need to continually find capital, right? And align their intent with the passion of a limited set of donors. Today, crowdfunding has completely reversed it, where you state your passion. How are you changing the world? And guess what? There will be 100, 1,000 donors out there who believe or are passionate about it, and it's the power of the crowd. They may only be able to give $100, but you multiply that by 1,000. So crowdfunding is a great example of how technology has liberated and empowered nonprofits to find people in the broad world who are passionate about their cause and are willing to vote it with their checkbooks. So that's a concrete example.
Thank you so much, Dean Samba. That is going to wrap it up for our time today. Again, thank you so much, Dean Samba, for sharing your expertise and your time with us today. And especially thank you so much to our audience, and thank you so much for joining us. Before we sign off, I'm excited to share with you the Chief Information Officer Digital Leadership Program, designed and led by Dean Samba. As you heard, the role of the CIO is rapidly changing, and to be successful, CIOs and CXOs need to transcend innovation, productivity, efficiency, and digital transformation. This program will give you technological prowess and business acumen to manage teams of talented information systems professionals and the business savvy to be captivating and convincing in the boardroom. We could all use that. If you'd like to hear more, or if you'd like more information about this program, there's a link in the chat box with more information. Thank you again for joining us. Have yourself a great day.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
Thank you.